going aside reading the Word of God and hearing the Word of God. Today I have a wonderful, amazing personality here coming all the way outside Ghana. Yes, the last time you saw of a pastor from Liberia. Today we have another one coming from Chicago. See, you don't want to miss it. I know you're excited like myself. You can see that bright smile on my face. So let's go for this quick music break, and when we're back, you get to know my guest. Welcome back from the break. If you just joined as Rhythms of Life on Hope Channel Ghana. And before we went on the break, I told you that today too we have another wonderful, amazing personality coming all the way from Chicago. He's actually a pastor, and that is Pastor John T. Boston II. I know in Ghana, when you say the second, meaning he's a royalty, right? Hello, Pastor.
Hello, it's great to be here with you.
Of course. How are you doing?
I'm very well. This is my first time in Ghana, so I'm absolutely excited. I don't want to miss anything.
You just don't have to. So far, have you tried any of our dishes?
A lot of them. I can't remember the names, but everything I've had has been amazing.
The fufu, the banku, the ampesi.
I think so, yes, all of it. The fufu for sure.
Oh, great. Okay, as I said, the second makes you a royalty. And I barely hear of a foreign person having the second. Where from the second?
Well, I think when my parents adopted me, they wanted me to have, my dad wanted me to have his name, and they threw the second on there because they just decided that they were going to be a little bit different. And so I got a royal title without a royal bloodline.
You're automatically, because our God is royal.
Absolutely.
So you haven't lost your way. You're still royalty. All right, so Vera, just tell a friend to tell another friend that today's conversation is going to be awesome as always. So they can join on Facebook or YouTube. There's Hope Channel Ghana. And you can send in your comments and your questions as the conversation goes on. And if you are home too, call that friend or family member to join you to watch this program on your TV. So, Pastor, I am so interested. You mentioned you were adopted. Is it that you were, excuse me to say, placed in this orphanage home or something like that?
No, actually, my biological mother, I just met my biological family 2 years ago. And so I only know this story since 2 years ago. I did not know the full story. I knew I was adopted when I was a little boy. My parents gave me everything that they could. I went to private Christian school my whole life, summer camps, horseback riding, trips, family trips. Beautiful, beautiful life, big, big family. My mother had 12 brothers and sisters. My father had 8 brothers and sisters. But I always felt like someone gave me up. Someone must have rejected me deep down inside, even with all the love. But 2 years ago, I met my biological family. And my biological mother, I found a cousin first using an ancestry DNA system to kind of learn where you come from. And I met a cousin, and I posted the picture and thousands of shares on a reunited website and called DNA Detectives. And someone responded and said, I can help you find your biological family with this information. And so I gave her what I had, and a few hours later, just through the night, that morning, she let me know, this is your biological mother, and you just need to ask her mother's maiden name, and that's the only thing I need to say for certainty that this is your mother. So I reached out to the woman that she gave me the information for, and she told me she had lost a son, and I said, well, I was adopted, and she said, well, my son was born in 1982. And I said, well, I was born in 82. And she said the month and the hospital. And I said, well, that's where I was born. That's the year, month I was born. And I didn't want to say, I'm your son. I might be your son. So I just said, I'm trying to fill in some gaps in my family tree. and she let me know. I placed you for adoption. She said, "Oh my God!" I remember the text as it came in because we're talking on Facebook. "You're my son. I've waited for this day." And so what I thought was rejection was something very different. She shared the story with me, and she let me know that she had been assaulted. She was raped, and she didn't know the man that raped her.
Before we even dive more into this issue of rape, how did you feel when the first woman told you that I met this person, actually someone who is your mother? How did you feel?
I remember the moment very clearly. There's probably not a day that goes by that I don't think about it. I felt an overwhelming sense of identity. My fuller or more full clarity on who I was and where I came from. And when she just wrote, "Oh my God, you're my son. I've been waiting for this day," the sense of rejection immediately was challenged because what I thought this person gave me up.
So all these years you've lived, you felt within you that you've been rejected.
Sure, yeah. I thought that this was somehow it affected my sense of adequacy. And I became quite a people pleaser. I'm not so much anymore, but I wanted people to feel comfortable and happy around me.
Like you want to be accepted.
I wanted to be accepted. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I felt. And so that I acted up, class clown, playing games, not taking things seriously sometimes.
So you think issues like this cause people to behave that way, like that kind of acceptance, accept me, love me, and take care of me, because growing up I haven't had that kind of connection with people. It do affect people that way.
It does. I think I don't want to oversimplify a very complex issue, but people who have experienced trauma in any way, because it's so many layers and shades of trauma, okay? Especially in ethnic communities, but everyone, when it's not resolved and there's not clarity about it, it affects us. For adopted children like myself, it affects adopted children in primarily two ways. One, people pleasing, or two, the second way is a sense of rebellion, being rebellious. And I don't know which one is better or worse, but I think that the idea is we don't want to be either one. We want to be who we are, and we want to be the best we can be. And for me, I wasn't being the best I could be because there was potential and capacity that I shirked because I wanted to be accepted or made adjustments that I shouldn't have been trying to make. And so that's how it affected me. And in hearing her story and the full picture of my story, it also affected me. It took a lot of counseling, a lot of conversations, a lot of processing to really reframe my whole sense of identity, because for up until that point, 37 years, I was adopted and rejected, and I have no idea who my biological family is. And in a moment, in a single meeting, I know my biological family and I know where I came from and how I got there.
Just couldn't take it all in at once.
Sure. It took time to tease out. And I think I'm just coming to a good sense of balance on what it means and how it's impacted me now.
So you're still in that process of recovering fully, right?
Yeah, and I don't know if recovering is the word I would use. I would probably say that I'm still in the process of understanding, of getting clarity. I think for us as believers, as Christians, as followers of Christ, our identity is in Him. But Christ does not divorce us from culture or where we come from.
Exactly.
So it's important for me to take that journey, and I'm doing, I think, well with it. It's a day-to-day thing. But but finding out that she was assaulted, and probably an interesting part of this, my parents put in an application. They felt impressed by God to adopt a child in May of 1982. In May of 1982, my biological mother was beaten mercilessly by the man she was in a relationship with, not the man that raped her. He was trying to get her to miscarry me in her womb. So pushed down the stairs, kicks to the stomach, punches to the stomach. And she said, if this baby lives, I'm going to give him up for adoption. She was not a Christian. She wasn't a believer.
God wanted you to live.
God wanted me to live. I lived, and the adoption agency, she made it to the hospital by herself, my biological mother. And she said, I need you to give this baby up for adoption. I want the baby to be adopted. She kissed me goodbye, and she said, God, if you're real, bring him back to me one day. And so the adoption agency called my parents and said, we have a baby. They thought it was going to, because they adopted an older sister, a daughter, and my older sister. And so they thought it would be a year, 2 years. Here it is a few months later. And the adoption agency said, we have this little boy. We think you all would be a perfect match. If I had not been raised by my parents, I would not have become an Adventist minister. Or I've preached in 42 countries, 43 now that I'm in Ghana.
Yeah, you're in Ghana.
And so it wasn't a good tour if I didn't make it to Ghana. And I've seen thousands of people come to Christ in the ministry he's blessed my life with. And my parents would not have raised me the way that I was raised. So it took 37 years for me to see the bigger picture. But now that I see the picture, all those years I thought I was rejected, but I was protected.
Of course.
He was keeping me safe from the harm that the enemy intended for my life.
So baby from the hospital right into a home.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up, how was it like? Because obviously you have no idea that you were adopted. How was it like growing up with your parents, your adopted parents?
Well, they loved us, my sister and I. They loved me with everything they had. They gave us everything they had, and they let us know that we were adopted at an early age. Not in the beginning, but I must have been 7 years old, maybe 6, but I think, and so. They helped us navigate that. My mom and dad helped me navigate that. They're my parents. Even when I searched for my biological family, they helped me with that process. We would talk, we'd laugh about it, cry about it, pray about it. And so they were, I know that everybody believes this, but they were the best parents in the world. They were everything that they knew to be. They gave it their all. And sometimes that's all we need to know, is that someone loves us with everything they've got.
You were 7 years and you were told that you were adopted. I mean, most of the time, people who are a bit grown and they're being told that, oh, you were adopted, get into some kind of emotional way. You were much, much younger, 6, 7 years. Yeah. What went through your mind when your parent told you this?
Well, I think I grew into it. You know, I grew up in a African-American home, black family in America. I could tell because of my complexion that I may not be a full black person. I remember the first time I went to East Africa and I said I'm African-American, and they laughed. They were like, you can't be African and American. And so, well, in America, if you have anything else but African, you're American, you know, so it's quite different. But I grew into it. Loving family. I think I had so many cousins. I don't remember quiet houses. Our family was always around. We were at my grandmother's house every Sunday and every holiday. Both of my grandparents were alive for many of my formative years. And my grandmothers on both sides, I should say, my father's and my mother's grandmother. And so just all of that love and support, and then going to Christian school made a difference. That's why I fight really hard for children to have access to Christian education today, because I know that so many children get lost in the early years of their lives, and it's much easier to build a person than to repair one. And so I believe that's one of the things that drives me to live my life the way that I live it.
It didn't change how you felt about them?
No. I did. I think that I remember having feelings of rejection, but those were drowned by overwhelming love. And it stayed with me, and I had to deal with that when I was not with my parents, as I got older, as I became a man. But the sense, it just became a part of my identity. It wasn't my whole identity. But now knowing where I came from and how I got here, you know, I'm doubly loved. I'm more than what has happened. I am a representation of not what has happened, but who I am because of what God has done.
You grew up in an Adventist home. Did that contribute to your ministry? Now you were pastor. Mm-hmm. Can you say that all this thing was up to the fact that you grew up in an Adventist home, going to a Christian education mm-hmm. school and all that?
It absolutely did. But I want to qualify that. There are things that my parents do in their faith experience that I do not practice the same exactly. But my parents gave my sister and I believe, a heart for serving God. And I think that it was their hope that we would be Seventh-day Adventist Christians, right? Mm-hmm. But because neither of my grandparents were Adventists, and because I have uncles that are in ministry and aunts that are in ministry and other faiths, I grew up with an appreciation for God's ability to speak to people even though they do not believe as I believe. And I believe in the nature of the Adventist church, and God has given us a very powerful, unique, and specific message. But I do not allow that to inflate my sense of God's ability to use people that are not me or that do not believe as I believe. And so growing up in an Adventist home, I don't know what would have happened. But I didn't just grow up in an Adventist home culturally, because Adventism can be a culture. We don't do this, we do this, we don't do this. It can be just like any other religion can become a culture. But there are a lot of people who are engaged in practicing their religion and their faith, but they have not experienced the voice of God in their lives. And my parents did not just give me the culture of Adventism. They gave me direct connection with Jesus Christ and his voice, and they nurtured that in my life.
They nurtured that in his life. There's something I have picked from what he said right now, that being an Adventist, don't make it look like a culture. You know, don't make it look like a culture, don't do this, don't do that. But, you know, spread it on. It's God's work and all that. Pastor, growing up, were you looking forward to be, you know, something else, like maybe a doctor, a teacher, a lawyer, a plumber, or something?
Yeah, I think I thought I might be a veterinarian or go into politics. I was kind of all over the place. But
of course, you Honorable John.
Yeah, that would have been it. Yeah, but I always knew I wanted to preach the gospel. You know, in my mind, I said if I'm a physician or in politics, I can still preach the gospel. You know, there were people that did that, and so that was. But I in my junior year in college, I felt an overwhelming sense to pursue this particular path of ministry. We're all ministers, right? You're in the ministry of journalism and the ministry of communications. Yes. And we're the priesthood of all believers. I think I teach at the Adventist Theological Seminary. I'm an associate professor there. And I believe that God calls each of us to our vocation. And it wasn't until I was preaching since I was 12 years old.
12 years.
But but it wasn't until the first time I heard God's voice in my life that I remember. I was 12 and I was working on my very first sermon. I had mentors helping me, and I could hear the Holy Spirit speaking to me clearly at 12 years old. I preached my first international evangelistic meeting at 15, and I was in Guyana, South America.
What year was that? Can you remember?
I don't remember the year. I remember my age. We can do some math and figure it out.
No, we do that later.
Yeah, but Bermuda and South America, and then East Africa was one of the first places I went. Jamaica and the Caribbean, and so and in ministry, it's exhausting and frustrating, but it is also invigorating and fulfilling.
The first time, actually, a man of God is saying it's exhausting.
It can be,
You barely hear that.
No, it can be. But I am living now for the past 7 years on borrowed time. I was in a very traumatic car accident in 2015. And so now I try to push through being tired because, not intemperately, but because I believe that God spared my life so that I could have the opportunity that I probably would have squandered if I had not had that kind of encounter.
What actually happened that day?
Yeah, this is it was a Sabbath day, April 25th. I won't forget it.
A Sabbath.
Sabbath afternoon. I just preached. I was in Columbus, Ohio, where my very good friend Pastor Samuel Ajay is pastoring now, and I was there at the Columbus Central Church, and I dropped my family at home, and I went to go to a member's house to pick something up that I had left there the night before. A couple that we were hanging out with, they were friends, but they were members as well. And I didn't have my phone with me. I just thought it would be a quick run, but I hit a power pole trying to avoid another vehicle in my lane. I didn't know that the power pole was there when I turned the corner. And when I hit the power pole, I realized I had been in an accident, and it was extremely hot. Now, I'm not from Ghana, but I'm from South Florida, and we're probably a little closer to the equator than Ghana. I don't know. I might be
probably the northern region. We compare that to the northern region.
I got you.
It's very hot there.
Well, it's hot in South Florida. Hotter than it is here right now. And I remember trying to take my seatbelt off and couldn't take the seatbelt off. I tried to open the door. I couldn't open the door. And I remember placing my head back on the headrest and thinking, I'm not going to be able to get out of this car. And I remember seeing the windshield glass melting in the car like raindrops. The glass is melting. And I could see it beating, and I saw one of the glass beads hit the dashboard, and it melted through the dashboard, and it hit the floorboard, the bottom of the car, melted through, and I could see the ground, and I could see light coming from there. And I looked over, and the passenger window was rolling into the car like a piece of paper. And in that moment when I thought I'm not going to be able to get out of this car, the door opened. A man reached in. He took the seatbelt off. He opened the door I couldn't open, took the seatbelt off I couldn't take off, and got me out of the car. And we walked maybe 20 yards away from the car. I don't know. I don't think he carried me. I don't really remember. I'm not clear on that. And he looked me in my eyes and he said, "My name is Johnny. You're going to be okay. What's your name?" And I said, "John." And he said, "What's my name?" I said, "Johnny." He said, "You're going to be fine." He said, "The police are on their way and I can't be here when they get here, but you're going to be just fine." And he left. I looked back at the car. The car, I didn't know it, but it was completely engulfed in flames. It melted into the road. There was nothing left. There was no paint, no glass, no tires. The road melted. What happened, and the man who took me out was gone. So I'm there by myself. It's drizzling just a little bit, a bit of rain. The car is melting into the ground. And the ambulance arrived, and they're trying to figure out what happened. And they rushed me to the hospital as a trauma 2 patient, meaning I was responsive but failing. And I got to the hospital, and I was disoriented. I didn't know what year it was. I'm really good with phone numbers. I couldn't remember phone number. I couldn't remember.
At that minute, your brain just
it just wasn't working as it should have been. And so I remember them talking about the toxins that I breathed in from that car, and they were concerned about my blood toxicology levels because of all of that, what I inhaled, and they were concerned about some broken bones. But by God's grace, I remembered a police officer, and the police officers were trying to help understand what happened, if they needed to go after the other driver that made me swerve. And I told them the name of a police officer, and they called him. He said, "I know him. He's a pastor." And I didn't remember that I was a pastor. Maybe some things we want to forget, right? But I did remember. And so they went and got my family, and the next day I walked out. But what I didn't know was that I had suffered a traumatic brain injury.
When your wife came, did you recognize your wife?
I did, yes. I just couldn't put things together. I knew things, but I couldn't bring them out. I could see words, and it's like I could see a paragraph, but I could only pick out words from the paragraph.
I'm happy you could remember her. Like, you'll bring
yeah,
back
that
issue.
was probably a good thing at that time, right?
Yeah. And then, like, why couldn't you recognize?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Really, that would have been scarier. Scarier. But so I couldn't write. I couldn't walk alone I couldn't drive, of course. I lost normal vision. My eyes were damaged, so it affected my vestibular abilities, my ability to balance. And if you've ever known a loved one or visited with someone who suffered a massive stroke, those are the symptoms that I had. And so I remember for 9 months, I was in therapy every day. My wife would take me to therapy, and I would spend hours. So it was like a part-time job going to therapy, but I didn't want to be an inpatient. I just wanted to go and go home. And I'd be exhausted just trying to button my shirt or write a sentence or write my name. It was exhausting. And so I remember when the division that I worked for in the Adventist World Church, North American Division, we were talking about me going on permanent disability. And I remember I had the papers from my local conference where I was pastoring. And they said, John, if you recover, you come back. But right now, this is the best option. You're pushing too hard.
Did it hit you so hard?
Like a train. Yeah. It took everything from me. It took everything out of me. It made me feel completely powerless, completely incapacitated to not be able to work or provide for my family, to be a primary or even a partner breadwinner. I couldn't. And so I remember praying one night and saying, God, I know you don't have to. I'll accept it if this is the way I will be. But if you give me another chance, I will give it everything I've got. I'll serve you, and I will make sure to spend my life doing everything you ask me to do. And so the next day I went in and I asked them to test me. And I was ready to test God. And I was prepared to accept that he might not. I didn't have a lot of faith.
You're probably being like Gideon already.
Yeah, I think it might have been more like Gideon than the Syrophoenician woman or the woman with the issue of blood. Yeah, so because men have less faith than women, So
amen. Did you hear that? I hope you heard that.
Yeah.
Women have faith.
Yeah. So I started taking the test, and they said, Mr. Boston, we don't want you to be frustrated. But I said, please, if I don't pass, if I can't progress, it's okay. I accept it. And I tested out, and I tested out of everything. I went to my doctor. They did another MRI, magnetic resolution image of my brain, and he put the images of when he first identified the damage and the images of that day. And he said, do you see anything? I said, it looks exactly the same to me. He said, it is. He said, your brain has not healed, but somehow all of your cognitive function has returned. And he said, I'm not a believer like you, but if I were, in your world, you would call this a miracle. In my world, I call it a medical phenomenon. Your brain is as damaged as it was, but you have full cognitive capability, full function has returned. And since then, I have been running and going and traveling, and I work with the White House on a local initiative in Ohio, mentoring, brought my brother's keeper as a faith leader. I did something with the Pentagon, the 87th Joint Civilian Orientation Conference, which was quite unique, traveling with them. And I've continued to travel, lecture, and I went on to serve in Australia in the South Pacific for a period of time. And the very place where I was going to be on disability in North America, now I am a professor at our top university in the world and teaching other ministers.
Praise Jesus. Praise Jesus. And I'm so happy about that. The fact that even with Ukraine, you visited Ukraine to help with this humanitarian work at the border, even when things are going, haywire all over the place with the war. Weren't you scared?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say scared. I was at Syria and Haiti after the earthquake. I was at Syria at the border of Lebanon, and in 17, and then in Haiti in 21 again for the big earthquake then. And I was at Ukraine, and I helped organize a protocol called the Safe Passage Protocol to help protect women and children from human trafficking. And if you ask me if I was scared, when people say, why would you run to a war zone?
Exactly.
Why are you going to these storms and this battle?
You're seeing death looking into your face.
I think for me, it's not my life to be concerned. Of course, I don't want my child to grow up without her father, and I take every precaution I can, but someone has to go. And I made a promise to God that if he would give me another chance, that I would serve him. And even when the call came to Ukraine, God told me, you're about to get a call right now to go to Ukraine. Say yes. And the phone rang, and they said, they gave me a scenario. Would you be willing to go? I said yes. They said, do you have any questions? No, I'll go. Because I know that I made an agreement with God, and he has not failed me. And by his grace, I do not want to let him down.
Your wife agreed to that?
No, but I did.
Of course. I need to ask women, of course, it was me. No way are you going to that.
Yeah.
But so how were you able to convince her in going for this mission?
Well, I think that my whole family understands my position. It's not something I would want to do. I genuinely feel compelled to serve in this way. If I don't get the call, I'm not gonna pick up a bag and go on my own. But if God, puts it on somebody's heart for me to show up someplace and find some way to make a difference, I'll do it.
He will do it. So far as God has delivered him, he will do it. Let's go for a quick music break. We'll be right back. I know you're enjoying it, so don't go anywhere.
Guys, I think this year we can do Count Your Blessings. Yeah. Count your blessings, bring them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. Count your blessings, bring them one by one. Today we are late. Today we are late.
I'm so sorry for being late. I'm so sorry. An idea. I feel like I'll be good on the lead. What do you think?
Wow, Tanaka Musa.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a nice thing. Yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah. It's nice. Yeah, it's not bad. I think we can do it. We can do it. I'll try and talk to you.
When upon life's billows you are tempest-tossed, when you are discouraged thinking all is lost, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord had done.
Are you ever burdened with a load of care? Does a cross so heavy you are called to bear? Count your many blessings, every doubt will fly, and you will be singing as the days go by. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what's God has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord had done. When you look at others with your lands and gold, think that Christ has promised you his wealth untold. Count your many blessings, money cannot buy. Your reward in heaven, or your Lord on high. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what's gonna say what God has. Count your blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord had done. Count your blessings, count your blessings, count your blessings, name them one by one. So amid the conflicts, whether great or small, do not be discouraged, God is over all. Count your many blessings, angels will attend, help and comfort give you to your journey. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your presence, see what God has done. Count your blessings, lead them one by one. And it will surprise and hold you. Count your blessings, lead them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. Count your blessings, lead them one by one. And it will surprise you once the Lord God has done it all.
Welcome back from the break. It's just an amazing, inspiring, discussion going on here in the studios of Hope Channel Ghana. And this is Rhythms of Life. If you just joined, you've not met so much though, even though you've missed some of it. But there's more to learn from the life experience of Pastor John T. Bushton II. Pastor, just this past August, I heard amazing news that you barely actually hear. Especially after COVID, you barely hear people doing things like that. That is your church school, Shiloh Adventist Church, having a school of their own, and this time around free tuition.
Yes.
How necessary was that to do?
What gives, huh? It's I'm a professor for church growth and in the practical and applied theology department at the Adventist Theological Seminary. So I'm an associate director for the North American Division Evangelism Institute. Many people, the United Nations even suggests that there will be 68% of the world's population will live in urban centers, places like Accra, or in this context, Chicago, the third largest city in the United States of America. We took on this church as a praxis environment for students, our seminary students, pastors, social workers, future physicians, even in some instances. They need to be able to navigate urban environments, okay? So we went there, and I believed that one of our clearest paths was for the Adventist school to be accessible. Chicago is known for violence, particularly gun violence. And the rate of death is not commensurate with the population there. It is off the charts from gun violence, particularly with young people. I don't believe it's reasonable for our churches to have their doors open in communities where children are literally dying in the streets, and we walk past them to get to our places of worship. And so,
like you see actual
well, no, I wouldn't say. In some instances, yes. In some instances, you can see the poverty, the effect of sex workers, prostitution, gangs. You can see these things. In some instances, there are churches, in the middle of church, you hear gunshots ring out. I've lived that when I was in Columbus, Ohio. But in Chicago, you have this school, the Chicago Seventh-day Adventist Christian School. It's 110 years old this year. And it's never provided free tuition, but it has always provided stellar education. So I asked the church, and our treasurer at the church found a number. What would it take for us to operate without killing the church and operate this school and make it essentially free, need-based? If you don't have it, that's fine. If whatever you have, you can give. If you have 0, then you give 0. If you have 100, you give 100. But the idea is that we want to make it accessible. We want to make it free, need-based. And so we went to the church in board meeting, the church finance committee, then board meeting, then business meeting, and it was a unanimous decision straight through. And to make Adventist Christian education free for those children was an act of faith, and God honored that. The church itself that committed to pay for every child. It's not that we're just, somebody has to pay it if it's free, right?
Yes, of course.
It's
because
just,
there's going to be administrators, there's going to be teachers,
that's right.
a whole entire
So the
body.
church decided to absorb the cost. And in so doing, the church has been blessed by God. The church has not spent any money. All of the money has come in from around the world. People inspired by the story, people giving out of the abundance of their heart, saying, I want to be a part of saving those children's lives. We have children in the school who are homeless, but they put on their uniforms in the morning and they take them off before they go back to where they came from. The social service system is not so easy to navigate. So we're working with law enforcement agencies to make sure they're protected and they're clothed and they're fed. While they navigate that, while we work on those things, they're children that come from abusive environments. And someone said to me once, aren't you concerned about the Adventist children who are now being affected by these children? And I challenged that notion. Our schools, like our churches, are mission fields. And we would not say that children can't come to church. So why would we say they can't come to school? And they're places of ministry, full-time ministry. And in that journey, God has been blessing. We still need more students to spend the money that has come in. And I'm praying for that. We got some deadlines coming up, and I believe that God is going to bring back to us a clear vision of what to do in that space, and He's been blessing us every step with it.
Amen. I think Ghana, we should start doing that. We're going to get the funds.
They'll come. They'll come.
They'll come. You heard Pastor. They will come. They'll come. So let's try doing it. In Ghana, we have a lot of Adventist schools, actually.
Yeah.
In Ghana.
I plan to see some while I'm here.
Please.
Yeah.
I will. I will do the honors. Try to go around, because we're thinking of having that kind of tour around the country to see our Adventist schools.
Yeah.
God bless you on this mission. Now I can take away our shepherdess, Kyla, out of this discussion. How did you meet her?
Tell me, explain it. What do you mean?
Okay, so how did you meet your wife? Okay, I met her here.
Yeah, no, I got you. Well, we met in high school at a youth congress for students. And from there, we went to college. Her father is a mentor of mine. And it took 7 years. I chased her for 7 years. But
before she accepted.
Before she would ever go on a date with me or spend time with me. And so I think she didn't want to marry a pastor.
Viewers, are you listening, please?
Yeah, I think maybe she didn't want to marry a pastor because she grew up in a pastor's home and she knows the sacrifice and the struggle and the pain of that kind of journey. But she was a great help in ministry. Some pastors marry nurses and teachers, but she was a communications specialist. And so she helped me with my ministry, and she helped really create the stories and she told those stories well. If we were living in biblical times, she would be writing the Gospels, or she might have been Paul writing 14 books of the New Testament, because she helps tell the story very well. We've planted churches together. She's never said, I'm not willing to go when God says we should move someplace. And in that sense, that was a huge, huge blessing. And our daughter we struggled with infertility for many years. And for me as an adopted man, one of my big life goals was to have my own biological children, right, so that I could be there for them and not give them up and protect them. I remember when I was in first grade, the teacher asked us what we wanted to be, and the other students said, I want to be, a journalist or a fireman or a preacher. I said, I want to be a biological father. Aww. And I know my teacher was like, this kid is crazy, And so struggling with infertility was very difficult, but God blessed us to have a miracle child.
How long have you married then?
We had been married for close to 6 years then. Yeah, so we had a lot of time, maybe close to 5 years, just over 5. And so, but we probably wanted children fairly right away. It wasn't something, because we knew each other. We kind of grew up together, kind of, a lot of time. And so when our daughter was born, I had a a gift from God, and that gift keeps on giving. She's 11 now. She's here with me in Ghana. It's her first time on the continent, and so really a special experience. Yeah.
Dear one, don't worry. We are going to show the video of the school and all that is happening, because I've had some messages about watching how the school is. We're going to show that even before we wrap everything up and leave. But we need to dive. How's your marriage experience so far? You've been married for how long now?
15 years. 15.
A decade and a 5.
A decade and a 5. Yes. Yeah. 15 years. I think that marriage in any profession can be a challenge. People are a challenge. We're all a challenge. But for marriage in ministry, it's a unique type of challenge, because your vocation is your calling, and your calling is your vocation. And that may be true for everyone. But I think pastors, we fail at understanding that when Christ returns, he will not ask us about the multitudes that we led to him. He will ask us about our spouses and our children, and maybe if we're blessed enough, our grandchildren. And I think that in missing that, we miss out on the bigger blessing. What would be a greater miracle? The miracle that I was in ministry and my family thrived and we were happy, or the miracle that a lot of people came to Jesus, but I lost my family. I think the miracle of keeping your family and bringing people to Christ together is the way. And I think my family, we have served his kingdom together, and it's a joy. Even my daughter, she preaches, and I try to dissuade her from being a minister so that she can be wealthy and invest in our family ministry.
Oh, she's gonna be wealthy.
But she'll probably be a minister. I don't know.
Life of my sweet mothers and mothers being a minister. You're going to go for, that kind of support for her. We're going to support you.
Yeah.
But so wherever you are, you got one fun here. And I know there's a lot of fun going to support you in going to the ministry. The rest of my viewers, join me to do that. Okay. All right. So have you been caught in a moment between God's work and your family, whereby you have to choose going or staying with your family?
Yeah, I think most recently some of the trips are quite dangerous and life-threatening, and so it unfortunately it does sometimes come to a please let me go, give me your blessing, because I have to go whether you give it or not, and that is not choosing between my family or ministry as much as it is making the decision that's being obedient to God's voice. But I think when it comes to church members, there's no choice there. My family comes first. And so in that instance, it's a matter of doing what is best to serve your family, not as a balance, but first, meaning I will serve the community through my family. And I think that helps puts things into perspective. I had it was a student many years ago, and he was the son of a minister, and he said, my father tries to balance. I was teaching in a high school and pastoring, and he said, my father tries to balance, but it seems like the church always outweighs our home. And that stuck with me, and I never forgot that. And so I decided I didn't want to balance. I wanted to prioritize, and the list of priorities, family is first.
Family is first. He says family is first. But being a pastor and shepherd, being a shepherd of a lot of flocks, because you've traveled around the world. Have there been a point you visited a place and you feel like, let me just stop being a pastor. This is just too much. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, all the time. I think we're living in very difficult times. And I do not believe that I am, nor are we, doing everything we can do.
You think there's more to be done?
I think there's so much more to be done. When I look at how we organize our ministry efforts, the resources that we spend and how we place it, is disproportionate to what we say our mission is. I think that...
Pastor, I want you to repeat that. The resources put in at the output, you think it's not balancing enough?
No,
it's like
no.
the resources is more than the output that
Absolutely.
comes.
We're spending more now than we spent 30 years ago or 3 decades ago, and we're getting less of a result. And the Word of God makes it very clear that His Spirit is going to pour out, that there will be an outpouring of the Spirit of God in the final days. And when Jesus walked the earth, He had multitudes following Him, flocks of people, and He had no social media. He didn't have satellites to broadcast. And so my concern is, if we are the body, then where are the multitudes and the miracles and that He promised? And I believe in large part we're very comfortable with us. And
We are too overcomfortable.
we're almost in a sleep, sort of, because we celebrate things that should not be celebrated without the celebration of God's people coming home, and our baptisms, in the way the Holy Spirit is using our ministries. We do things almost in many instances exclusively for the church, and that expense of resource for people who have heard the gospel, knowing that there are millions, and in some social scientists say billions of people who have never heard of Jesus Christ. I just can't reconcile that. That's why we're in Chicago. That's why I took on a church, and even that is quite difficult. It's a challenge, and I'm open for the challenge, and I'm all there for it. But I think that we have to reevaluate in our church. And when you've got mothers like mine, my biological mother, who was raped and then beaten mercilessly by another man she was in a relationship with, and had to give her baby up for adoption. In 37 years, she never heard Jesus is coming back. There's a problem with that.
A big one.
In America, this is, that's one instance, but then there are countries that don't even have religious freedoms that allow for the gospel to be preached openly. I've been to some of these places where we have to...
The Middle East and the
Yeah,
rest.
absolutely. And so what I'm suggesting is that I think that we're doing a lot, but we can do more. And so you ask me, have there ever been instances where you say, I want to stop? I don't want to stop because the work is hard, but I want to find new ways, fresh ways forward. I work with an organization called Child Impact International, and it's a supporting ministry of the Adventist Church. And they fight human trafficking. They fight against things that have been accepted as cultural norms, but have devastating effects on the communities that they're part of. And those types of things are where I find a bit of joy. I do not find joy in talking about a church anniversary or spending time planning a banquet for church members.
You think that is not necessary?
I don't know. If we're in the last days and we're in the final moments of Earth's history, I would rather spend my time another way.
That hits differently, actually. It hits differently. I'm actually having goosebumps right now. I don't know if you really got what he said. That as we Adventists, at this moment is not when to have all those celebrations, but more importantly, winning more souls for Christ. I don't know how it got to you, but to me, it's really a very powerful thing you're saying. Pastor, summarizing our conversation. So, what last word do you have for our youth out there?
Yeah, I think that as a young person, your ability to change the world is exponentially greater than someone who is not as young as you are. I know that Jesus and his disciples, I don't know if you've ever considered this, but do you remember when Jesus had to pay taxes for his disciples and he only paid for 2? He paid for himself and Peter. Do you know why that was? That was because all of his disciples were teenagers and no taxes were owed for their age bracket. That is why they lived the lives that they lived. Long lives, many of them. They suffered in the end for the cause of Christ. The point that I'm making is that we know that was the case for the apostles. In the early days of the Adventist church, It was a teenage Ellen White who gave visions to help shape the identity of our message in the world. You are not the sum total of those that have gone before you. You are more than that. You are everything that has come before you and everything that stands into your future. And so because you have more future by God's grace, you have greater capacity. And so I would encourage you to take your life, your young life, and say, God, use it. He can do more with it than you ever will. You don't have to have a testimony of how God restored you when you can have a testimony of how he used you to restore others. And I want to encourage you to use every part of your life, even the ashes, because little becomes much when you place it in the master's hand, and he can make beauty from your ashes. So use all parts of your life for God's glory. And you don't have to be a preacher. You can be a journalist, communication specialist, a physician, an entrepreneur, a business owner, a politician. All of these things are in Scripture, all of them. And God used them all to tell his story, and he wants to use you to do the same.
Amen. I'm glad I know you're doing same there, and I don't know what you're carrying with you. But first of all, I want to say a very big thank you to our very own pastor, Pastor John T. Boston II, for the second royalty. Yes, for gracing our show. Of course, it's our show, my viewer and myself, Rhythms of Life. May God bless you in your ministry, for it to extend more to your family, your wife. Yes, my number one friend, Madison, now, yes. I'm taking that with me. Madison, God bless, and our greetings to them as well. And then wherever you find yourself, please tell somebody you enjoyed Ghanaian fufu.
Yes, I will.
Do that for us. All right, and to you, a viewer, today, I'm coming with me that I am a minister in my own way. We are doing God's work, but there's more to be done. You don't need all the time to, you see, Pastor sharing his experience of being adopted. Probably you were not adopted, but it's not about what you went through to be what you became, but what God have used you to do to impart life is what matters. And that is what I'm carrying with me. I don't know for you. My name is Nana Akusia Boache. God bless you, my viewer, for always making time to watch Rhythms of Life. Until we meet again, stay focused, be safe, and stay tuned for the rest of our programs.
For one night only, the city will converge at the National Theatre as United in Praise presents the Acapella Festival.
Why don't you get up and give the Lord a shout of praise?
Yes, race for a swell musical experience on Saturday, December 31st, as Ghana's hottest acapella groups usher us into 2023 in style. On stage, Black Capella, The Manifest, Vocal Part, Note 6, K3M, New Era, Soul Street, with a special appearance from Pestak Briggs, Gifty Dia, Mark Enim, and Perez Music. Tickets are selling now for a cool 70 Ghana Cedis single and 150 Ghana Cedis VIP. Or you can go for 300 Ghana Cedis for the family of 5. Dial star 928 star 529 hash to purchase your tickets. Get ready for the Acapella Festival live at the National Theatre. Don't forget, the date is Saturday, 31st December. The gate opens at 5 p.m. sharp.
The Acapella Festival is proudly endorsed by Beyond the Return and supported by Charterhouse, Events Dome, Midima Foheba Clinic, Meridian Ghana Conference.
This event is powered by United in Praise.